All right, so this is part three. This is going to be the last one. Probably end up being shorter. Another difficulty you face in transitioning is what do you do with that position? Like having a position that isn't represented by academic institutions or supported by them or political groups or the general public. Why undergo the change when it seems like most people don't or won't? And what I mean is I don't mean thinking that women should be running things, but I mean identifying as someone, like taking on the identity of a person who will talk about it and discuss it. Why bother? Why take that position if you're not going to be represented in any way by institutions, political groups, the general public, or artists? Like most artists won't even touch the topic of matriarchy or gynarchy. So in a mature way, not a way that, like, if you look at Japan, they bring it up, but it's either fetishistic or it involves a lot of male violence. I have never seen a matriarchy done in Japan that didn't involve one of those two things somehow making its way in there. So why undergo it? Like, this is what you're going to have to do. Is why, if I'm not going to be represented, if I'm not going to be, if my position just going to be drowned out? Is it like what is the point of having is in retaining a position that most people aren't going to retain? Like, what's the point of marginalizing yourself? What's the point of rendering your voice ineffective? At least seemingly at the outset. That's how it looks. It's like if I take this position, you know, I'm basically electing to grow or to try to either grow the community, or I'm electing to always have an unpopular opinion that's going to remain on the margins for the rest of my life. And that I and the people who think like me, well, our position is not going to be relevant for some time. So if that's the case, why bother with it? And that can be a difficult thing when you're transitioning, right? When you're becoming whatever kind of gynarchist you're going to be, whether you're an anarchist, whether you're whatever angle you're coming from, you have to find some way to believe that these beliefs can grow into something that will be represented one day. I think on some level, each of us deals with this in a different way, but I have to believe that someday, that whether it's in a community or a political party or whatever, that there will be a greater representation of this belief other than the individual, because it is individuals right now who are representing the gynarchist position in general. It's not communities, it's individuals. Now, this is a bit of a strange one. The next and final one is overcoming previously held convictions. In other words, being concerned about how your transition could be used by your enemies to hurt others. So here's a good example of this. Let's say you've been a feminist for 10, 15 years, right? And you've been in the public eye. You have enemies. People have been scrutinizing every little thing you say. People are watching you like a hawk. And you know that there are some people who have falsely labeled some feminists as gynosupremacists, right? They are falsely applying the label. Well, sometimes you can have concerns when you start to actually think, hey, maybe women should be running things. You have concerns about your image. You have concerns about how that is going to feed into a narrative that your enemy has about you and that is perpetuating about people like you, which is, oh, if I become this thing, then that's going to just make him seem like, if I come out and admit it and talk about it, it's going to make him seem like he's justified in having his opinion and feeling the way he feels and thinking whatever way he thinks, or whatever way an anti-feminist or these other groups think. And so there's like this line between, if you're a feminist but you're becoming a gynarchist, if you are if it's happening, if the gynarchic transformation is taking place, how do you become that while retaining the feminist identity? Because if you're no longer a feminist, if you've become a gynarchist, how do you retain the feminist identity when you no longer feel like you're part of it? But also, how do you transition in a way that doesn't damage other innocent people or uh, doesn't embolden or encourage an enemy who was afraid of you becoming the very thing you became? This is kind of why I feel it's a case of, sometimes sooner or later you create the enemy that you want. And I feel like that was a problem. That was kind of the ironic thing about my personal life, which is they created their opponent. They created somebody that they were afraid of, somebody who used to be a supporter of theirs. So in my life, I am a byproduct, a creation of that people were afraid existing. And that's why, there's all this. That's why I think there's so much talk about feminists being gyno supremacists, because I think people are afraid of feminists becoming gynarchists. I think there is a deep rooted fear among people in the far right, among other traditional groups, of feminists saying, we're done with this, let's embrace gynarchy. But and that's I think that's why they tried to detach that label, and they tried to forward that narrative that feminists are gyno supremacists, because it's almost like a way of saying, if you transition into it, you're just proving my point that, oh, this is who you really were all along, even if it wasn't. You might just be somebody who just one day decided, I don't think egalitarianism is enough. I don't think it's going to be able to resolve the situation. I think we need this. We need a gynarchy community. We need this or that to really rectify the problems that are going on in the community, the world, whatever. And when you have people who have already been accusing you of being something that you're not, but then you find yourself becoming that thing, well, that's a serious challenge that you face, because you have to be concerned about how your enemy is going to use that narrative to hurt you, to hurt women and girls, to hurt other people. And yet at the same time, you have to find ground where you can just be yourself. So when you are a feminist, especially an outgoing one or a public one, and then you find, uh-oh, I'm actually becoming this thing. Like, is it because they planted the thought in my head? Is it just because I realized that I don't want to be part of this anymore? Or what is happening to me? Why is this happening? Sometimes it happens because you are introduced to an idea. Other times it happens because you start processing the information that you digested as a younger person in a different way as you get older. Sometimes it can even happen because you see that there's no change taking place, right? You were a feminist at 18, and then what happened? Sex trafficking was on the rise. The activism didn't work. Men showed that they didn't want to learn anything. You have all these different. You can't underestimate the lack of progress that feminists, especially feminist activists, face, because results matter. And so when you see a rise in misogyny, when you see a rise in sex trafficking, when you see rape being as prevalent as it was when you were 18, it just begs the question, what are we doing wrong? Am I just not working hard enough? Are the feminists or the other feminists just aren't working hard enough? Or could it be that we have the wrong approach? So time can actually be one of the greatest factors in change for a feminist. Because if you are seeing that nothing is happening, if you see that everything seems to be the same when you're 18 versus when you're 30 or whatever, then you're like, okay, is this even working? And if this isn't going to work, what will work? And I think that frustration about the lack of progress to change has the potential to be the catalyst for transforming a feminist into a gynarchist, or a radical feminist into a gynarchist. It is always possible, or just a feminist into a radical feminist. It's always possible for this to happen. And I think that as time goes on, as things get worse, we will see more radical transformations taking place, despite how difficult these transitions can be. But I think this is definitely a big one. Is there any others that I failed to mention? Is there any others that you'd like to talk about? Once again, yeah, I think I repeated that in the video earlier, but I just wanted to say it one more time. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your energy. I really appreciate it. I hope everybody has a great day. Please take care, everyone. Happy holidays, and peace out.